But now, as they say, to the main event. And that is Jan Hasbrouck is our speaker. And I got to tell you, if you can see, I've got goosebumps. I've been waiting a year to introduce her for this keynote speech because she is such a treasure. She has contributed in a very significant way to our understanding of effective instruction in general and literacy instruction in particular. She is the author of several books, including Conquering Dyslexia, Reading Fluency, and Student-Focused Coaching, which, by the way, is the best type of coaching. Along with Nancy Young, she is the co-author, co-editor of Climbing the Ladder of Reading and Writing, which provides a really nice framework and background information on meeting the literacy instructional needs for each and every child. She has been a featured speaker in more conferences than I can count because she is insightful, she is dynamic, very clear in her messaging, very passionate and compassionate. How many of you have heard Dr. Jan speak? Okay, a few of you. Well, you know what treat you're in for. What you may not know is this is kind of a homecoming for Jan because she has very, very deep roots in direct instruction. As you will see in her presentation, AAA framework and direct instruction, success for every student. Please help me welcome Jan Hasbrouck as our 2025 keynote speaker.
Well, that was a lovely introduction. My goodness. Most people that introduce me don't get goosebumps. That's lovely, Kurt. Make sure I've got this on. So, this is fantastic. I cannot tell you how excited I am to have this real honor to be here to present to you, share some of my own history with direct instruction and how that has shaped and informed the work that I've done over many decades. And those many decades, I'm getting reminders of some of those decades as people are up here talking about 50 years this and 51 years that, because yeah, some of that are fond memories of mine. It's also an honor and just a tiny bit intimidating to be here keynoting this particular conference. I've done lots of conferences and spoken lots of different places. I've been blessed to have those opportunities. But the person who used to kick off this conference year after year after year after year was Zig. And nobody can top him in terms of inspiring people, at least for me. He was a person that, as you are going to see, changed my life, and through his materials continued to change the lives of teachers and children all over the world. So very honored when Kurt first asked me to come. Gave me some suggestions of things he would like me to talk about, one of which was to connect my direct instruction history to work that I've done around reading fluency. So that's where that AAA framework comes in, and I will show you and tell you a little bit more about that. So I'm not in any particular position to be an ambassador for Eugene, Oregon, but I did grow up here in Eugene, so I do feel like welcoming you to my hometown in some ways. It is a beautiful place. I do hope you're in a really particularly nice neighborhood of Eugene, but there are many, many other places to go visit if you have a chance to do that. Some of you maybe are new to DI, are you? Is this, you're just a few of you? Welcome to the family. Okay, very good. I'm glad that you're here. Are you attending the conference for the first time? Some of you, quite a few of you. Oh, this is fantastic. What a treat. How exciting that is. I'm not new to DI. I'm not attending the conference for the first time. And I do want to share a little bit of that journey with with you. So if you are an elementary reading teacher or have that background, you can read upside down, right? We learn to do that across the table from our children. So you can see that this photograph was taken in August 1961. This is a picture of me with my two sisters. We are standing outside of our house and barn in the back. You see a barn. The farm I grew up in, just outside Eugene, Oregon. Any of you familiar with Eugene? There's a beautiful park on the way north to Coburg Road called Armitage Park. If you're in Armitage Park and you walk to the east side of the park and then down a little road that doesn't allow cars, but you walk down that road, you get to our farm. That's where I grew up, walking distance of Armitage Park. Some of you who have been in Eugene or are Eugenians might know Johnson's vegetable stand, which is out in that direction. If you go to Johnson's vegetable stand and keep driving, the next farm is this one where we grew up. We'd actually been in Eugene a couple of years. My parents moved us here in 1959. So I have I no longer live in Eugene. I live in Seattle, Washington with my kids and grandkids. But I did live in Eugene for the longest of any place I've ever lived. But I picked out this picture because this is a good representation of the true start of my journey. I dreamed as long as I can remember of being a teacher. I wanted to be a teacher. So I forced my sisters to play school with me a lot. So this is summer, we're supposed to be having fun. No, we're gonna play school. This is me, the teacher. If you can see, I've got a very stern look on my face. I took teaching seriously. This is not fun and games. We're teaching children important stuff here. The little one in the middle is the youngest sister, who was perpetually the student. My other sister didn't have any patience for this. If she participated in this day, she did. She's the principal, dressed up in probably my father's only suit, but there she is, she's the principal. At that time, all we knew were male principals. We hadn't seen a female principal, so she was a tomboy. She said, okay, I'll be the principal. So that was school. And that is when I found this picture after my mom passed away, I found lots of things that she had saved and was really pleased to see that picture because it did remind me of the early start of my journey. I wanted to be a teacher. I knew I did. I was very, very lucky. After I graduated from high school here in Eugene, I enrolled and applied for and enrolled at University of Oregon. Go Ducks! Yes! I'm still a crazy Duck fan. This is a picture taken on my front porch in Seattle, Washington, where I put my life in danger because by proudly displaying my U of O heritage, because the Huskies up there, both of my children are Huskies. Ew, how did that happen? But it did. But anyway, I was probably that enthusiastic when I started my program. I'm going to learn to be a teacher. I'm going to take these courses and they're going to teach me to be an effective, skillful teacher. And I'm sure some of you can relate to the fact that very soon that enthusiasm went away. And what was replaced with was confusion and deep frustration because I was taking courses, I was diligently taking these courses, and nobody was teaching me how to teach. I just kept waiting for that. Surely, I'm paying my tuition money and I'm reading these textbooks and I'm doing the activities. And at the end, it just seemed like we're doing activities. One deeply in my memory is in science methods course, we made toast. Remember that? Like, okay, toast, it smells good and we get to eat it at the end, but what does this have to do? What does this have to do with teaching? And I took a music class where we all learned to play the recorder, as the professor said, we're going to play the recorder. I'm like, oh my God, we're not the students. We're supposed to learn how to do that. But in that music class, deep memory I have, we all had to take turns teaching lessons. And I watched one of my, I have no idea what I taught, but I remember very, very distinctly one of my classmates getting up in front of the class and teaching us to recognize a chord, as I recall. Whatever it was, she was teaching on the piano and she was going, ding, 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 this is a C, this is a C. What is it? Let's say it. This is a C. Ding, ding, ding. This is not a C. Is this a C? No, this is not a C. Whatever, And at the end of that lesson, I ran up to her and said, what was that? What were you doing? It's not, I've never seen anything like that. And it looked like she knew what she was doing. For the first time, it looked like somebody had a plan and they were doing something. Like, what was that? And she said, it's called direct instruction. And there is on this campus an alternative program. You can stay in the one that you are, or you can walk across the tennis courts, as it was at that time, and meet this guy, Zig Engelman. She said, Ziggy is over and he's recruiting students to be in his brand new track, teacher preparation track called direct instruction. And I think at that time they were recruiting, warm bodies. So it was, a big honor to be included, but I signed up. I said, you seem to know what you're doing. And when I learned more about Zig and read more about what he was saying and listened to him, the things he was saying just resonated with me, that certainly kids are enchanting, but they also have a future. And their future will be a lot brighter if they have choices. We can accelerate what they learn, and we can change their capacity to learn. And he didn't just talk in these flowery things, kids are beautiful and important and learning is important. He knew how to do it. This direct instruction thing that came out of that genius mind of his, a powerful teaching system that combines logical analysis and testing of the content students are to learn, thoughtful selection and sequencing of instructional examples, clear communication between the teacher and the students, high rates of student engagement, reinforcement and corrective feedback built in so you know what the heck you're doing, judicious review because some students get it quickly and some students don't, and then practice to mastery for every student. That's the plan. That is one of the best descriptions of direct instruction I've ever read, because it does incorporate all the components of design, whether you're teaching spelling or reading or mathematics or whatever. And this framework for teaching children to accelerate their learning, for giving them those choices and options, came out of the head of that guy. So, and this motto that he lived by and ingrained in all of us, I can promise you, when you did a practicum with little live children and Zig was watching you, you knew that it was imperative that those students were learning. And if they didn't learn, you hadn't done your job. If the student hasn't learned, the teacher hasn't taught. So when I was 19 years old, I entered the direct instruction training program. So for me, instilled in the DNA or fiber of my body, this way of teaching, knowing that it's our responsibility to teach children, that it's not the teaching, it's the learning that's important, and that using a carefully designed program gives me, as the teacher, gives every teacher who uses these materials the freedom to do all the wonderful fun stuff that teaching allows. I don't have to think about what should I present next or how should I correct an error. I don't need to think about that. I can think about which student is responding and which student seems to be fading a little bit so I can pull them back in, and how, ooh, these children seem ready to be accelerated. I can think about all those wonderful, more creative aspects of teaching. So I've always felt deeply empowered by the tools that Zig gave us. Speaking of tools, when I started at age 19 doing the direct instruction materials, we went out to a school. Those of us in the cohort went out to schools every day, and all morning long we were teaching, and then we would come back in the afternoon and take courses. At that time, all the courses were taught by Zig because he was the guy who knew this stuff, so we would, take various courses, but they were all taught by Zig. But in the school, in the mornings, we were using DISTAR materials. DISTAR, the original term for the framework, the direct instruction system of teaching and remediation. So we were trained to use DISTAR reading, now reading mastery in various forms, DISTAR language, wonderful program that is not as widely used as I wish it was, but we never thought about teaching reading without teaching language alongside every day. We taught reading and language and reading, and then we also did a turn teaching our students DISTAR arithmetic. And it's really important when I shared my PowerPoint with Kurt to review, like, am I on the right track? Am I saying the things you wanted me to say? He did want me to be sure to say that all of these updated programs, DISTAR was the beginning, the core, those three things, but you can go out and look at the McGraw-Hill booth. There's many, many, many other programs now that exist, but they all have that same incredibly perfect design with the field testing and all of that. So you've got a tool in your hands that will work for students. So we diligently taught those DISTAR lessons, and we were supervised almost every day, not just by Zig, but he had trainers who would come and watch us, and we got pretty good at teaching direct instruction. So I finished up my undergrad program and then got a phone call that they said, we'd like you to stay on and do your master's program with us too. And you're going to shift from being a trainee to being a trainer. Here locally, I was training people, one of whom is sitting right over there, who showed up this morning, Mary Bauer, who became a dear friend of mine, dear enough that she was present in the room when my daughter was born. Yeah, that's what happens when you teach DISTAR to people. They kind of become your family. That's the way it is. Another one of my trainees, Mary, I had dinner last night with Randy and Marilyn Sprick. So, you just never lose track of those people. So I did, of course, I said yes. I had to make some arrangements. I was married, and my husband had wanted to go off, do a program, study geology, petrology, actually, in Montana. And I said, okay, but you have to postpone that for a year because I have this opportunity. So I worked locally in the local schools and trained amazing people, but also participated in Project Follow Through, which had training sites all over the country where the direct instruction materials were being tested, essentially evaluated alongside numerous other methodologies for teaching, and the federal government funded this for many years in a very rigorous evaluation of which of these programs did the best with students. So many of my colleagues were in Project Follow Through, were assigned to a specific site, and they would, like Randy went to Michigan, he would just go back and forth to Michigan. Michigan all the time. I got to be a floater, which was the best job because then I got to go to North Dakota and Arkansas and Washington, D.C. and Tennessee and Texas and travel with the other trainers and coordinators. If you don't know about project follow-through with your perhaps new connections to direct instruction, you definitely should, because it was unbelievable, one of the biggest educational evaluations that's ever been conducted. Went on, as you can see, for a number of years, the largest experiment ever to find effective materials, effective methods, and direct instruction significantly outperformed everything else in not just academic achievement, but self-concept, and they did longitudinal examinations, long-term effects. This is, looking mostly at did the kids get better academically, but yes, but they were assessing other things too. So self-concept, long-term outcomes, and direct instruction was the only model that consistently had those high achievements for both academics and self-concept. And I want to tear my hair out when I think about this. We knew this. We have known this since 1977, and we still have to keep asking people, reminding people, informing people, have you ever heard of direct instruction? No, but we want to use evidence-based programs, Okay, let's talk about evidence-based programs. So I did the undergrad work with Zig and learning the DISTAR methods. I had the fabulous additional opportunity to work with project follow-through. And then after that year, when I got my master's, Zig actually did ask me to stay on and continue working. It was sort of a job interview in a way. Someday, privately, you buy me a glass of wine, I'll tell you about that job interview. It was a memorable experience and tempting, very, very tempting, but I really, really wanted to be a teacher. So I did. I got hired in the Central Lynn School District, which is right up I-5. I worked in the morning in Brownsville Elementary, and then during my lunch 15 minutes, I drove over to Halsey, and I taught at Halsey in the afternoon. I did that for 4 years. Then I started having children. I wanted to be a little closer to home, so I started working in Springfield, Oregon for quite a few years. So I wasn't always able to use direct instruction materials, but I tried when I could, and I certainly advocated for the use of direct instruction materials wherever I was, whether I was using those materials or not. And I was thrilled, honored, and completely gobsmacked. They hid this very, very well from me. I was invited to attend the award ceremony at the 1984 Direct Instruction Conference, sitting there not knowing at all that I'd even been nominated for this award, but I was given the Direct Instruction Teacher of the Year Award in 1984. That's me in this little newspaper that, again, I found after my mother passed away. I went through her stuff, and there it was, this folded up newspaper of announcing my award. And in the ceremony, they said that Jan has encouraged and supported other teachers in the use of DI programs. When administrators tried to eliminate the use of these programs, Jan was right there leading the fight. Indeed, I was. And I lost. They came into our room, they took all our DI programs, I don't know what they did with them, and gave us some basal program to deal with. Was not well designed, and so what I did was, what I knew was what good instruction looked like. So what I found that I could do with all of that deep training is take a program that wasn't particularly well designed and tinker with it a little bit and make it closer to something that would be effective for students. And that using and embracing the principles of direct instruction has continued through my whole rest of my career. So I did work as a reading specialist and then a reading coach for a number of years. I became a professor after getting my doctorate. I worked for 10 years in Texas. Yeah, I heard there were some Texans here. I was at Texas A&M University. These days I work primarily as a consultant and advisor to schools and districts and agencies, both in the U.S. and internationally. When I'm at home, I love to volunteer. This picture was actually taken in the classroom where my grandson, he's in a K-8 school. He's about to go into 8th grade, but he's been there in this one school since kindergarten, and this was his K-1 classroom. And I don't know if you can see my expression there, but I'm just so excited, you know. These kids are about to come in, and that's my happy place. I'm also these days collaborating, as Kurt said, on numerous things, different assessments, different books, research projects. I'm part of a research project with Dr. Pamela Snow at the university in Australia, and all kinds of exciting things continue to happen to me. But the through line, the story, is that those principles of direct instruction that I learned in the classroom from Zig Engelman himself, but also very much from just using those programs, incorporated in my thinking, my sense of what good instruction looks like, that has played a role in everything that I have developed, including one of the books that I wrote called Reading Fluency. Reading Fluency has been a focus of my research and work from early on, especially when I entered the doctoral program here at the University of Oregon and started working with then a brand new young professor named Jerry Tyndall, and he was all about assessing students using curriculum-based measures, and I started at that point really thinking about fluency. So a few years then, I got to have the opportunity to write a book with a wonderful colleague, Dr. Deb Glazer, about reading fluency. And in this book, we define reading fluency, and specifically passage reading fluency, as reading with reasonably accurate reading at an appropriate rate with suitable expression that leads to comprehension and, we can hope, motivation. That's our definition, and it mirrors many definitions of fluency, but it's tinkered with precision and forethought to represent the research quite precisely. So the two core aspects of fluency, the foundations of fluency that we hope lead to comprehension, motivation, we care about fluency because of comprehension, it's the accuracy and the rate. So we very carefully crafted that term, used that term, reasonable accuracy. We also put it first in our list because Deb and I, are very familiar with the research, the evidence about learning, where accuracy has to be the foundation. If you're familiar with the instructional hierarchy, Herring et al.'s work from the 70s, that hierarchy leads ultimately to mastery, but it starts with accuracy. So we wanted to start, of course, with that foundation, accuracy, which we define as the ability, a reader's ability to either correctly decode or instantaneously recognize a word, but also understand its meaning. We want to be sure this is all about comprehension. If you read our book, I'm hopeful that the message would come through that you're reading a book about fluency, but it's really a book about comprehension. That's the goal, that's the purpose. The purpose is not to make students fluent. The purpose is to assist and facilitate comprehension. We do that through fluency. So understanding the word needs to be part of this, not just figuring it out or knowing the word. So that's the accuracy part. What do we mean by reasonable accuracy? Where you're going to hear see the influence of ZIG and direct instruction in me, because we're differentiating the opportunity to read accurately, whether a student is in an instructional opportunity with a teacher, one-on-one, or in a small group or a large group. In instruction, the reasonable level of accuracy is different than when a student is off reading by themselves. So in instruction, reasonable accuracy is 100%. I mean, I can hear Zig's words and, kind of yelling at me right now, Hasbrouck. That kid just made a mistake and you didn't correct it. And, you've got to correct every error 100%, because that's what instruction is. It is that opportunity to, if they already know it, they don't make any mistakes, then learning isn't happening. They're learning something new, so mistakes will be made. Every direct instruction lesson is crafted so students make few or no mistakes, but when they do, you correct it. You don't correct it punitively. That picture of me with that sour face being sort of the mean teacher, I soon learned you don't have to teach like that. You can teach with joy and compassion and fun and enthusiasm, and we want to make corrections that way too, but we make them every single time so that the students are actually learning. But we don't always have that opportunity. Students do read independently, and because we care only about fluency in service of comprehension, we looked at the research that said if accuracy falls below 95%, comprehension is going to be impaired. Some of you may have read my book or maybe attended some of my workshops, and when we do a workshop on fluency, we do some activities where we craft text where about 5% of the text cannot be read or understood even by skillful readers, and you will not comprehend it. It's quite amazing to think about, but it's quite amazing to experience, because we can think about 95%, surely, I mean, that's really high level, that's gotta be fine. I mean, but it's really the lower end of accuracy that will facilitate or allow comprehension. Rate is an important part of fluency. It's the one too many people think of first. Fluent reading is fast reading. It is not. And we wanted to talk about emphasize that in our book by putting it second in our list, but also emphasizing the reasonable or appropriate aspects of rate. But when we talk about rate, we are talking about speed, the speed of reading text, or the underlying components of fluency. Before you get to text, it's the letters and the sounds and the words, and it is the speed, is the rate. But when we talk about appropriate rate, well, we could have, and we do cite the brilliant Steve Stahl and Melanie Kuhn in our book, and when we're talking about rate, we could just leave it up to them when they said fluent reading should sound like speech. Yes, that's the purpose. Because what reading is turning code. Most of us use print because we have our eyes and we've been taught to use a visual coding system. You don't need your eyes to read. Eyes are just one way you can read. What you do have to have is language, and then you have to have a code. Those two things are absolutely necessary. You don't need your eyes. You can learn to read with Braille. You can use a tactile code. But you have to have language. Which is why way back when we taught reading mastery, when we taught our DI, we taught language and reading, always together, because those two things, Zig knew that. You need both of those things. You need to teach them how to read a code, but you need to develop their language. So when Stahl and Kuhn said fluent reading should sound like speech, yeah, that's it. Because we want to teach students to decode or recognize words and understand what they mean so effortlessly that it is turning the author, somebody else's language, back into language that their brain recognizes. And if we do that too quickly or too slowly, the way our brains work, comprehension is going to be impaired. So we want to build that accuracy first, but then also help them read fluently at the rate of speech so that their brain recognizes it. But we need some numbers. We have numbers to use for accuracy, and we have some numbers that we can use for rate as well. And my colleague, Jerry Tyndall, and I have done work over close to over 25 years for sure, but we had dinner while I was here in Eugene this week and talked about one more iteration of our Hasbrouck and Tyndall norms. So we're going to hopefully have that out in another couple of years. But we've done 3 different studies starting in the 1992, 2006, and 2017, where we created oral reading fluency norms of words correct per minute that we can give guidance to. And other researchers, we just created the norms, and we didn't say what are the best places for students. We said these are just the norms for second graders, for third graders, whatever, beginning, middle, and end of the year, and just put it out there. Other researchers have done the work to verify, validate that the 50th percentile on our norms is the low end for rate or automaticity, really, words correct per minute. The 90th percentile, there may be some benefit for some students to get up to that level of automaticity, but we do all that instruction together. And when you take those 2 components, accuracy first, always, first, foremost, and forever, and incorporate rate, we're really talking about a whole new entity. When you take accuracy and rate and meld them together, you are talking about automaticity. And what words correct per minute measure is automaticity. Words correct, there's the accuracy. Per minute, there's the rate. So automaticity is a really wonderful indicator. And we have another body of research, curriculum-based measure, has 40-some years of validating that automaticity, measures of automaticity in writing and spelling and reading are the best indicators of overall proficiency, a general outcome measure. So that's why we can and should be using those automaticity measures with our students. And that's all important for comprehension. So when we talk about instruction, and this was the part that Kurt wanted me to share in my talk, when in our book, Deb and I talk about what fluency is and the definitions of fluency and reasonable accuracy, appropriate rate. We talk about expression and all of those kinds of things. So a good part of the book is what is fluency? Why is it important? But eventually, of course, in the book, we wanted to talk about fluency instruction. So Deb and I, being very committed to evidence-based practices, did a deep dive into what we know is effective instruction for students with fluency from across the journey, from just the very beginnings of reading through more advanced reading. And we came up with, we had some good ideas, but Deb came up with this framework. I think it's really brilliant, and I want to give her full credit, because she said one day, I think when we write our chapter on fluency, we should use the framework of AAA. And I do love it. I think it makes perfect sense. When you are teaching a lesson in which you want the end goal ultimately for the students to be fluent readers, the first thing you need to incorporate in your lesson is accuracy. Of course, that's the first A. The next thing that you need to incorporate is rate. But when you incorporate rate and you've already incorporated accuracy, you're really focusing on automaticity. You can talk about rate separately, but in instruction, it's not rate you're working on, it's automaticity. And then the third A, the whole point of being fluent is comprehension. But there's another puzzle. Comprehension doesn't start with an A. So she came up with access meaning. So this is the instructional framework, deeply embedded in, validated by evidence. If your goal is fluency, you teach for the goal of accuracy, automaticity, and access meaning as much as you can. And then we will get students to be fluent. So I want to spend a few minutes, and of course, yes, I'm at a direct instruction conference, got to remember this. Direct instruction is always going to be the most optimal way for getting kids to be accurate, automatic readers who can access meaning. Always the best approach to this. So what we know when we focus on fluencies, we often focus on automaticity. Marianne Wolf and her colleagues remind us that, yeah, that is the goal, but to get there, we have to remember that fluency develops in progressions. To get to passage reading fluency, it always, I mean, she's read the research too. She's done the research. You have to start with accuracy, then automaticity, but you start at the letter level. Fluency is something we should think about as teachers at the letter level, the letter pattern level, and then the word level. And then we can pay attention to automaticity, but also meaning, that access meaning, because we now bring in syntax and semantics when we get phrases and actual text. So that image of developing fluency has been very important to me. And I love demonstrating that using this little thing. Maybe I'm introducing this to you for the first time. There should be some laughter here. You've never seen Scarborough's rope. No, we've seen, if you're in the reading field these days, you see Scarborough's rope anytime anybody says reading. You know in the next 5 minutes or so they're going to show you Scarborough's rope, because it is such an accurate, brilliant, easily interpreted representation of what reading is. And so and she meant it to be an infographic, a demonstration of the development of reading from the beginning, all the components that need to be there and how they are developed over time and interwoven together to get to that tightly woven rope of skillful reading, the fluent execution and coordination of all those components. She has also said, Dr. Scarborough is still around, and she said that when she submitted this infographic to the editors to be printed for the first time, when it was actually printed, there's an error in this, a big glaring error that she likes people to correct. She said there was supposed to be an arrow across the bottom, which makes a whole lot of sense because this is a developmental model. It goes this way, or I guess for you guys, this way to develop these skills over time. But I like to use this to demonstrate AAA, the instructional framework. If the goal is to get to that tightly woven rope, that skillful execution and coordination of all those components, we start, like Marianne Wolf and Katsir Cohen say, we start at the beginning at the emergent stage. And here at this stage, AAA instruction would focus on phoneme awareness, that blending and segmenting, learning those letter names, learning those letter sounds, and always developing language. As students build on that, we build mastery and we move students to that, what we might call the novice stage, where they're now decoding words and using decodable text to read. So AAA instruction would be accuracy. First, can you read the words? Do you know the meaning of the words? Then we move to automaticity. And once we get to words and phrases, we spend some time accessing meaning. So we're not teaching students just to, he ate the fig. Okay, let's read a little faster. He ate the fig. Okay, next sentence. No, let's stop. Because I'm seeing in these little first graders' eyes that they may not know what a fig is. He just ate a fig. Can we stop? So what did he just do? Talk about that. He ate something. What did he eat? A fig. Do you know what a fig is? A cookie. Oh yeah, there are Fig Newton cookies. Do you like them? I do not. No. But I go to classrooms and I go to direct instruction classrooms even, and I watch good teaching of the decoding piece and the automaticity piece often, and time is short, but the whole point of reading is comprehension. So spending some time, maybe not every single sentence, but a sentence like he ate the fig is worthy of some attention to accessing meaning. So we could do that here. When students are in that transitional stage, they're really doing really well with the codable text, and we can bring in text that is not as highly decodable. We might call that instructional level text. So it has more irregular words, high frequency words, vocabulary words, and the semantics and syntax gets a little bit more complicated. AAA instruction: accuracy, automaticity, access, meaning. And even when our students become established readers, as they all do by the middle of second grade, right? Yeah, we can dream. But that's our goal. The research scientists, Linnea Airy and many others say with good, appropriate instruction across the early levels by the middle of second grade, most students can and should be reaching the consolidated alphabetic stage where they understand the alphabetic principle, they know what reading is, and all they do is need more instruction in complex words and vocabulary and lots and lots and lots of practice to keep being fluent. But these students need and deserve, and even the students who are established or proficient readers, we can keep them learning by providing instruction in passages of increasingly complex text. But we don't just hand it to them. We teach them, and we teach them using explicit systematic instruction, but we teach them to be accurate, automatic, and access meaning through that work. And then these children I have spent my decades of work working with, the children who don't reach easily those established and proficient stage. How does AAA work with those students? Well, first of all, we have to figure out who they are and what they need, because these students are not monolithic. They might be stuck there for varieties of reasons. So we start with that good instruction to target identified needs. And once we have figured that out, then we do AAA instruction: accuracy, automaticity, and accessing meaning, because that's the point of everything, that accuracy, automaticity, access meaning. I hope I've sold you a little bit on that framework. I really think that came out of the brilliant mind of Deb Glaser, and it really fits not just in reading, but in everything we do. If you think about that instructional hierarchy, it models that, it aligns with that perfectly, and the goal is to move students beyond those early stages. But the accessing meaning is very, very important. So I do want to wrap this up and let you get on to your break and then this wonderful conference ahead of you. We're here because of this man who gave us the gift of direct instruction, a powerful, effective teaching system that has proven to significantly outperform other instructional models in achievement and self-concept and those important long-term concepts. That's what we want. So I feel very blessed that that little girl standing there in her flip-flops and having corralled her sisters into playing school got to achieve my dream. I got to be a teacher, and I continue to get to teach people, and that's just fantastic. And it wouldn't have happened without this guy, and he stays with me every single day in one form or another. This is a photograph of my office in Seattle, Washington, and there's a framed picture of Zig on my desk. And that picture is the cover of the program that was given out at his memorial in April of 2019. I came down to Eugene on a miserable, rainy day where hundreds of people from all over the world had come to pay tribute to this man. And in that, so he sits there looking at me every day that I'm working, and I hear his voice in my ear about all those things. But mostly that phrase that he's so famous for: if the student hasn't learned, the teacher hasn't taught. So I hear that and say, go do good teaching work, Jan. I want you to go do good teaching work too. Have an absolutely fabulous conference, and thank you for your attention.
NIFTY provides implementation guidance to school and district leaders, as well as training and coaching to teachers implementing direct instruction programs to ensure that all students are successful. For more information on what NIFTY can do for your school or district, visit our website, www.nifty.org.